Hello. Today, we are going to continue the conversation around the power of not knowing, but on a topic that's something we can all relate to of knowing ourselves.
Hello, and I am so interested in discussing this topic with you, Stacy. As you said, it's really something that we all, either sooner or later in our life, or actually in every day, we face, but not always consciously. We deal with knowing ourselves or not knowing ourselves. We deal with selves from early morning till late night, and who knows, maybe in our night sleep as well. But how can knowing ourselves help us, and how not knowing ourselves can help us? I'm so interested in discussing this topic with you.
Me too. I think in just listening to you there, knowing yourself and doing work on yourself and all of the terms that are used are a little buzzy these days and subjective to everyone. So for you, what does knowing yourself really mean?
I'll divide as a person and a professional. Why? Because we have the professional jargon that I will use and explain, but we also have our everyday conversation. For me, knowing myself as a person is knowing what makes me interested in something, what makes me intrigued, what makes me sad, what makes me angry, what triggers me. Really being aware of how I react to certain things, and also to which extent I catch myself when I'm reacting versus proacting. Professionally, we have this idea of self-concept, which means how we see ourselves. And typically, we divide it into our roles. I am a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I am a woman, I'm a professional. Whatever roles we assign to ourselves, we can talk about them and to which extent they affect our self-concept. Also, what we like about self, what we dislike in terms of personal characteristics. So these are the things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about myself. What about you?
Gosh, I feel like it's my life's work and why I started Kaya. I think knowing myself is getting past and under all of the conditioning and judgment and preconceived opinions about myself and about the world, to find, it's almost like mining and finding the most pure form and self-expression of myself. I have struggled in getting past all the layers. So knowing myself is, yes, I agree, like paying attention to my desires and likes and what inspires me, but it's uncovering and getting to the like real truth of it versus expectations of the world or people around me.
You beautifully compared it with mining.
Yeah.
And if we continue using this analogy, when we are mining, we are discarding this elements that we don't like or don't want into getting into our precious metal, right? Some would call it a soul, some would call it the truth about myself, some would call it something that is eternal and infinite in each of us, something that doesn't die when our body dies. I think that where it is not like mining, that all these layers that we are uncovering, they are very meaningful. They are not these parts of Mother Earth that we are not interested in. We are interested in all our conditioning. Is something to look at, because we still live in this body. We have our ego, and many people nowadays would like to discard ego, they fight their ego, or they would like to transcend their ego, whatever fancy words we use. But our ego is actually a very interesting phenomenon, that it's a big part of us as long as we live in our body. And very often it helps us, and very often it stands in our way. So I think it's very important, first of all, to acknowledge these layers of when mining, again, using this analogy, as needed, as playing their own role, and acknowledging them, not just throwing them as something with negative connotation, but exploring them. But then getting into your authentic self or your truth is also an interesting journey. But it's a journey. It's not an end result. This is how I see it.
I love that, and fully believe we're on a journey in knowing ourselves. I think what you say about the ego, of learning when it's helpful and when it's not helpful. And I think that has been a lot of my experience in being able to be aware of when it is helping me and helpful, and when it is a hindrance and I'm hiding under something or I'm bearing something that I need to pay attention to.
Do you want to explore it a little bit today?
Sure.
Because it's a part of because this is how we can use what we are focusing on, power of not knowing. Because most of us actually don't know our ego. And why? Because ego uses defenses or defense mechanisms of the ego. And most of them are unconscious. And that is why we almost like trying to catch our tail by trying to catch our ego. Ego is very cunning. Ego is really something that we need to know and acquaint before we can transcend.
Yeah.
And that is why the first thing I actually would like to ask you, when you think of ego, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
I think of ostentatious and showy and look at me and look at how great I am, and posturing this appearance of myself in the world that is not authentic, that is hiding behind a lot of defenses and layers and conditioning.
Interesting. So you...
Wait, hold on. What do you think when you think of ego?
Well, I still have a question. So it's with rather negative connotation, right? For you, the first thing that comes to mind.
Yes.
Okay. So for me, the thing is that for me, the concept of ego is spoiled because I studied it so much that it's hard for me right now to differentiate between what's my personal or authentic attitude toward ego and everything I know about ego. So this is a good example when my knowledge actually stands in the way of my authentic not expression of my ego, because I express it every day, but understanding it. Do I understand it with my heart, or do I understand it with my head? So for me, ego is our self-concept. It's how we see ourselves in the world. For me, ego is the mechanism of the mind that actually protects our identity, individual identity in this body. And the positive thing of this is it helps us, it motivates us, because if we want to climb social ladders, if we want to achieve something, if we want to be disciplined and even working on ourselves and discovering our authentic self, we need to be disciplined. And discipline is a big part of ego, or ego is one of the functions of the ego. So for me, ego has both positive and negative connotation. Of course, I agree that it's the showing off, but why do we need to show off? Why do you just take any example in your life? When do you need to show off?
Well, I reflect on Kaya and the business I'm started and growing, and what has held me back is not wanting to be ostentatious and put myself out there. And because of my definition and because of my thoughts around ego, it has held me back, because I don't want to put myself out there, because I don't want to be flashy. But I have decided to start and create a business that is requiring me to put myself out there. So it is very close to my heart, this conversation.
And it is your ego that helped you to start this business, because this is the first thing we need to do. By the way, ego and also your heart, because I would like to differentiate between ego, which is always in our head. Ego is our intelligence. It's in the head. Ego cannot be in the heart. Why? Because my understanding, of course, because in our head, we always compete. In our head, we always protect our self-image. And this is exactly where we are flashing and showing off, because we want to protect our image. We want to be liked. It's all in the head. Mm-hmm. It's all about me, my family, my country. Ego cannot, it's counterintuitive for the ego to say all of us. It's either me or us or some of us, but it's only our heart that I believe counterbalance our ego, that says all of us. We are all one. We all suffer together in different ways, but we all know what suffering is. We all love together. We love in different ways. But as we discussed last time, love is universal. It's like any physical element of the earth. Ferrum, sodium, lead, gold. It's universal. Yes, we can keep our little piece of gold, right? Gold ring, gold chain, or whatever it is, and it can be pressure for us, and we wouldn't want to lose it. It's how we sometimes handle our love to another person, right? It's mine, and that is why we hold on to it. But love is universal, and gold is universal. And this, I believe, this comparison help us understand. It's more tangible understanding on what really love is, and how we can have a piece of gold, but we cannot have all gold in the world, or we can if we don't claim our ownership on it.
Yeah, I think it's helpful.
Individual ownership, personal ownership.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think about ego coming from the head and being about me, versus moving to lead from your heart and having it be about us and everyone and universal, and everyone is trying the best they can and taking steps forward to where they want to go, but knowing that we're all somehow connected and helping each other.
And ego, it helps us to put us, as you said, you had to go out and introduce Kaya, and you needed to bring Kaya into the world and yourself into the world with your work. It's ego. But wanting to help people and yourself to open our hearts, it's the hard work. So here it's competition. Here is cooperation. Here is, I would like to be the best. Here, I would like to be the most efficient and loving and forgiving. Here, I would like to know the most and to know more than other people, and to have all the valuable knowledge that especially I can sell, because the concept of money, my money, is here. And the concept of, okay, whatever I have, I don't grip on it. I don't, it's mine for a moment, and then it flows. And that is how our ego, or our mind, and our heart, or our soul, we can call, or our authentic self, or whatever we choose to call it, is in our heart. I believe that we need both to operate in this world. However, what we really need to look for is not allowing our ego to drive our boat, not allowing our ego to make fundamental decisions. It can sit next to us. It can, because whether we like it or not, it is there as long as we live in our physical body, at least my understanding, but we will not let our ego drive, and we will not let it make most important decisions.
It's like where your motive comes from.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Where your motive comes from and where most of your energy comes from. Because if your energy comes exclusively from intellectual understanding, it's the energy of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
If the energy comes from the heart, first of all, from the heart, we have access to the universal energy through the heart. Through the head, we can only have access to the universal knowledge. It may be very valuable, but it's always limited. The power of the heart is unlimited.
So that brings me to something I've been thinking about, because it's something I still struggle with, of how do you put yourself out there and lead, but lead from your heart and not your head? And how do I overcome this barrier of not wanting to be flashy and ostentatious, but also be authentic and true to myself? I've thought a lot about like what hinders or helps people in believing in themselves and following what is truly in their heart and getting past what's the conversation in their head, the ego.
Well, it's a great question, and conversations in your head will continue. We are Homo sapiens. We are thinking creatures. Thinking is our nature. And that is why some people want to stop their thinking, and they hope that in meditations they can stop their thinking. Well, the way I understand it, we cannot stop our thinking. We can slow our thinking. We can increase the gaps between the thoughts. And this is actually where all power is, I believe. But we cannot stop thinking. So again, not throwing it as unneeded. Our thinking is a great instrument, and our intellect is a great instrument. But if we use it very precisely for what it is designed, solving problems. Intellect is for solving problems. And when you asked a very good question, what helps people to fully be in their power or trusting themselves and putting themselves into the world. First, if you come onto the scene of serving with the idea, I don't want to flash, you see, you immediately come with the idea what you don't want to be, instead of coming with the idea what you do want to be. When you put this flashing or not, showing not or not on the back burner, and the front burner is your heart. I am here to serve. I am here to create the safe space for people to express themselves. This is what you truly want, right?
Yes.
Why it's so difficult to put it on the front burner? Why it's so difficult to lead with this? I would like to serve. I would like to create the safe place for people to express themselves. Why do you think this first, I don't want to flash, I don't want to show off, I don't want to be egotistic? Why does this come first?
Because I'm in my head and it's about me. I'm making it about me.
Yes. You said it, and you said it so beautifully.
Yeah.
When it's about you, it's a hindrance.
Yes.
When it's about how I can serve, and by the way, not help, because helping immediately assumes that someone is somewhere struggling and I'm somewhere above them trying to help. Help is needed only when it's asked, or when it comes from the heart. Can I help you? You always ask, can I help you? But it's more serving. Mm-hmm. Serving, offering something that people may be interested in. And when you're in your head, when it's about how do I shine or do I not? You see, this is a great example how cunning the ego is. Actually, fighting the ego is our ego's most delicious food. Why? Because when we are fighting it, we're thinking only of it. Yeah. So when we stop fighting our ego and let it be, and try to focus more on our heart and serving from the heart and acting from the heart, making the decisions from the heart. It means from the universal, from the oneness, from love, again, universal love, not my little piece of gold in my sacred space somewhere, then ego actually is very helpful when it's on the back seat, not leading. And then it immediately will start questioning yourself. The imposter syndrome, all the questions about am I good enough, they are ego questions. Mm-hmm. So they're not humble questions. Imposter syndrome, my understanding of it, and many people are talking about it nowadays, but it's one of the main questions of the ego. Am I good enough? Am I on my place? Of course you're on your place. Of course you're good enough. It's only ego that questions it.
So
your heart doesn't question it.
That's intellectually, it's very easy for me to understand and hear and listen to you. I think absorbing that in the body and feeling that in the body and really truly believing it is a different story. So how do you get through your imposter syndrome?
I like how you put your hand onto your heart and showed your body, because our body is so intelligent, and how it lets us know that we're in our ego. It means we are in pain, we are in conflict, we feel constricted, we feel defensive. This what means we are in our ego. Our body shows us, not our mind. Our mind is very tricky, as I said, and it may actually make us feel humble and wanting to deal with our ego. But as I said, the ego is in the center of it. But our body doesn't lie. If we feel uncomfortable, if we feel that we were violated, that we were misunderstood, that we are not loved, our body immediately lets us know. So I believe the first way we learn how to address our ego and how differentiate where it's our mind and where it's our heart in action is listening to our body. For example, when someone, especially the person you love, that you care about, tells you something that it's not pleasant for you to hear, what happens? Just from your personal experience, either at work or at home or among friends, when someone says something that rubs you the wrong way, what do you feel?
Defensive. I close up. I get short.
Yes, and I do the same. And we react differently. Some people may yell and they are very confrontative and they say, you such and such, how can you tell me that? And some people would keep it to themselves, but it will still hurt them inside. But what is hurting?
My ego.
Yes.
But how do you make sense of it still hurts? Okay.
This is one of the strategies, if you will, to deal with it. It hurts because I believe I was attacked personally. What if I think in this very moment, or put my hand in my heart and think, what if it were not me? If the same situation happened with my friend? It's the easiest technique or strategy that we can use. Would it be different? Let's say not my mother said something to me, or my boyfriend said something to me, or my boss said this to me. This very thing was said by someone's boyfriend, or someone's boss, or someone's mother to them. What do you think you would feel? Or maybe you tried it before, and what would you think do you think it would feel different?
So your question is what someone said to me, if it wasn't to me and about me, how would I feel?
Yes, not how would you feel. Yes, how would you feel if, let's say, you are witnessing someone else's mother or boyfriend or boss or friend says something to your friend, close friend. Do you think you will feel the same intensity of pain or discomfort? Probably
not.
Why not? I actually agree with you. Most likely not. Unless this person you feel the position to defend her right away if you believe she or he is attacked. But let's take very specific example. It would be, if we take an example from a real life, it will be easier for us to discuss. If something comes to mind, let me know. And I'm also thinking of an example.
I have an example.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So when I was working, I oftentimes worked all weekend and at nights. And I vividly remember one weekend that I worked all weekends on a presentation, and because I didn't want to ask my team to work on it, and I just knew I could bang it out. So I did, and I was exhausted on Monday morning. And I presented it to this person, and they didn't like it. And they just gave me feedback all over it. And I immediately broke into tears because I was so exhausted and so hurt that they didn't like it.
And now let's say they would say the same to your friend who also worked on the project, a different project. What would
I
you
would have a lot of empathy for my friend because I know how it feels.
But would you have this pain? Would you break into tears?
No.
Most likely not. Because for each of us, when we put so much of our time, our effort, everything we have into something, we start identifying with this something as a part of us.
Mm-hmm.
This project that you worked on became a part of you. You had a very, like, you held on to it, you had a grip that like, right? Mm-hmm. And now someone is telling you, this is your baby, you identify with it, you put so much energy and so much expertise into it. And someone says, it's not gonna work. Someone says, your baby is ugly, or your baby is something. Oh my God, for a mother, for a person who birthed this project, of course, it's like a stab in your heart, right?
Because I made it part of me.
Yes, this is it. Whatever we make a part of us and to which we hold on to when the grip is so hard, when hold on too tight, mm-hmm. This is when we feel pain. So one of the answers is not holding on too tight to anything. Be it your project, be it your beliefs, be it your identity as a woman, as a scientist, as an entrepreneur, as a whatever label you put all around you. And we all do this. We all are full of labels. The more tightly we hold on to these labels being a part of me, the more difficult it would be if someone questions it, if we lose it, God forbid. And then the more tight we are holding on to this, the less energy we have. We put all of our energy into holding on. The less energy we have to exploring new, to actually saying, okay, let's improve this baby together. And we're talking about the project. As we're talking about the real baby, they don't need any improvement. They are just the way they are, and it's a gift of the universe. But how can we make it our baby? How can we make it our project? How can we make it open so other people can also participate? Cooperation versus competition. Mm-hmm. You wanted to compete. You wanted to present yourself as this project represent you. And this is where the pain came from.
Makes so much sense. Yeah.
So that is why, for me, self-knowledge starts with knowing to what you grip to heart, to what you hold on to heart. Which roles, what is so important for you is your role as a woman, as your role as a girlfriend, as your role as a mother or daughter or friend, or a successful business person, or a beautiful person in terms of appearance. What is it that you hold on to too tightly? And if you hold on too tightly and something questions or this part of you is in jeopardy, inevitably you will feel pain. And then when you feel pain, the first question you may ask, where am I holding on too tight? What is it such a big part of my identity that I don't want to let it go, that I don't want it to be questioned, that I don't want to open up about it?
Yes, that's a great
and question it and actually explore it myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that.
So in terms of imposter syndrome, um, we all have it. And if we look at the roots of it, who knows? We don't know where the roots started. Some may say it started with these idea, especially in Judeo-Christian philosophy, not religion necessarily, but philosophy. It comes from the original sin, right? From Adam and Eve eating this forbidden fruit from the tree of good and evil. And
Sorry.
and if we really go that far back into the idea of the original sin, then maybe it's rooted there. I actually believe it's rooted much further in history, because there are some Egyptian suggestions that the idea of Adam and Eve was much deeper in history than 5,000 years ago. But the idea that something's fundamentally wrong with us, and it's still very heavily permeates our culture, that we constantly need to become, we constantly need to change, we need to be better. I believe this fundamental cultural belief, or who knows, maybe human belief as a human race, that is the root of all our questioning ourselves, not being content with the way we are, not being content with what we do and the way we do it. I believe the roots are very deep. But instead of trying to go and ask question why we are the way we are, right? I think the much more helpful question is, what can we do with it every day? What can we do with it when our body tells us, I am protesting, I'm in pain, I want to be different, I want the situation to be different? This is where we can start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And asking those questions from your heart and not your head.
Well, you can actually ask with your head, because this is what traditionally we ask, but the answers ideally finding in our heart. I actually have a question for you from whatever comes to mind in terms of your either personal life or professional life. Um, maybe a moment of triumph or the moment of deepest despair. Just how these moments were different. What was going on, if you remember, in your body or in your mind when this happened? And I'll come up with mine as well.
It's funny because this memory is so powerful and vivid in my life. I don't have a great memory, but this memory from high school. So I'm 5'3" and have probably shorter in high school and had no business running hurdles, but my brother ran hurdles in track and I did everything he did. So I figured I could run hurdles. And when you run hurdles, you're supposed to take 3 steps in between each hurdle. Because my legs were so short, I took 5. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, jump. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, jump. And all track season, I did every meet and I'd get my butt kicked, but like I just showed up and I kept running hurdles. And the last meet of the season was like state or, big finals. And I was so used to getting my butt kicked and I was like, whatever. And I got out of the starting blocks and I 3-stepped the hurdles. I didn't even prepare. I didn't think, well, of course I prepared. I went to practice every day, but I didn't tell myself like, I'm going to try to 3-step these hurdles. I was so unattached to the outcome that it was like, I'll never forget the feeling. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I wanted to like pause in the middle of the meet and like tell my coach like I'm doing it. So that is like this moment of great elation, and like I felt on top of the world because I did something that I wanted to do all season, and I tried to do all season in a moment where I didn't even try to do it.
It's such a beautiful example, and thank you so much for sharing it, Stacy, because you said I was not attached to the outcome. I was not really at that moment, I was not trying. You were in the momentum. And who knows, this mysterious power starts working when we stop being attached to the outcome, or at least release our grip to the outcome. We really still don't know why these momentums happen. It's a mystery. I believe we start my personal theory about it. We start working in sync with the universe when we release our attachment to the result, when we release our attachment to competition and being the best or being better than others. Maybe being the best we can be, it's different. But then when you're trying just to go with the flow, not even trying, when you stop trying, you get into the flow. And this is a beautiful example that then when you actually think, okay, how did I do it? You probably wouldn't be able to answer, right?
No.
You just practiced, you showed up, you practice, and then it happened. With imposter syndrome, we are so focused on ourselves and how we look and whether we fit or whether we are so much more, the energy goes into feeding, how am I looking, how I'm perceived by others, that we don't have enough energy to actually expressing ourselves. Because what you did in that moment, it was the best expression of yourself when mental barriers were the least hardworking. They were still there probably, because I don't think we can completely release them. Or maybe we can, I don't know. But at least they were not on the front burner. You let them go. So this, we talk a lot about letting go, but the more we try to let go, the less we can let go, because again, energy goes into the wrong direction. So I guess, yeah, go ahead.
I think you said it really well, of being not attached to an outcome or an expectation. I had no expectation to,
You said it.
Yes. But I also, what we were talking about earlier in the conversation of identifying, like I didn't really, track and field wasn't part of my identity. Like there was no grip that I had in that moment. Being an athlete, I think, was part of my identity. It probably, and was important to me, but I was so free that, to the point of allowing energy in and having the energy to have the fullest expression of myself was there.
And I think the example that comes to my mind, when actually not a triumph, but rather pain that I felt, well, I identify with being a psychologist. It's my occupation. I am really, really, truly interested in human mind and human soul and human ability to express themselves, and how human psyche works. And I'm a psychotherapist, so understanding others is one of the big part of who I am professionally, or at least what I am identify with and grip into. And for me, one of the most painful moments in relationship with my daughter, who is an adult, and she's 36, and right now we have more adult conversations, but when I was still early in my career and she was an adolescent and young adult, and she would tell me, "Mom, you don't understand me." This was a stabbing into my heart, probably more than anything else, is how can my own daughter, how can she tell me I don't understand her, because I must understand. This is another thing that we put on our shoulders when we identify with something. If let's say we identify with this scenario with my profession, I must understand, and I don't, it means I am not a good psychologist, but then I immediately transfer I'm not a good person. And then let's say if I identify with my image and I have to look young, slim, what they also said, tan and and in your 20s, right? 40s, something I learned a long ago. And if you are not that, and if you identify with that, if this is a big part of your identity, then not only are you not a beautiful woman, then you are not a good person. This is the problem. Then whenever part of our identity we are tightly identifying with and holding on tightly, when we believe we lose there or we fail there, it immediately transfers into failing as a person. And this is not true. Mm-hmm. This is not true. Whatever true part of us is cannot be hurt. It cannot be killed. It cannot disappear. It cannot be questioned because it's there.
Yeah.
We still need to connect with it more often. But I think just the idea of that it cannot be questioned or killed or abused. Our mind can be, our heart cannot, because truth cannot be abused. Only untruth can be abused.
So what I'm taking away from this conversation is the tighter the grip that we have on expectations, outcomes, and what we identify with, the more severe the pain and the more we set ourselves up to be hurt by external forces, whether that be conversations, words, actions, feedback, whatever it may be.
Yes.
And to move through that is to have motives when you're putting yourself into the world that are more from your heart and cooperation and connectedness than competitive ego. It's all about me.
Yes, yes. And also when you were talking, it's not only attachment to the final result that holds us back, but also attachment to certain ways of doing things. Because we are conditioned to do things certain way, conditioned by our culture, by our, if it's a corporate culture, sometimes it's by our corporate culture, family structure and culture. And these cultures condition us or train us to do things a certain way. And it may work in some situations, but it may completely not fit in other situations. So non-attachment to the exact rigid way of doing things as well. The more rigid we are in the way of doing things, the more we set ourselves for pain and disappointments.
Beautifully said. Anything else you want to share on this topic?
Yes. Another moment of pain or that we often get disappointed when we, with our significant others, when they look at the situation differently and they want to go a different direction. We often feel we want to go one direction and they want to go another direction, and we feel we love each other, we want to be in each other's life, but it comes to, let's say, financial decisions, raising children, spending time together or separately, any areas of life. It may be as minor as decorating the room, and it may be as big as raising a child in a certain either religion or with certain beliefs, and partners disagree. I think we may even set a special meeting for that, because it's a big concern that many clients bring into the table. What to do then? Well, I think the easiest way is to walk away right away. It's easy, and just this is why we have more than 50% of divorce in this country, and I believe largely in the Western world nowadays. But is it the most efficient? Is it the best possible decision? Sometimes it is, but I believe not um, not immediately. And I believe it is also connected with self-concept, because the more tightly we grip into our beliefs or the way we think things need to be done, the less likely we will be able to negotiate, to compromise with another party. And it can be, I started it as a partnership, but it can be anywhere, in politics, in business. The more far right or far left we are, the less likely we find compromise and meet in the middle. Because all traditions, all spiritual traditions, philosophical traditions, psychological traditions, it boils down meeting in the middle, trying to find a compromise or cooperate is even better. But in order to do it, we need to let go of some of our beliefs. We need to let go of some of our ideas of how to do things, and even some of our parts of identity. Because if our identity is very rigid, if our identity is very, I actually would like to compare it with when our identity is rigid and our beliefs are very, we hold on to our beliefs. We are like a piece of ice. You hit it, it falls, it really scatters into pieces. But if it's a vapor, or even if it's water, then if it's a stone, water can go around the stone, right? Mm-hmm. In our way, or vapor can even have more freedom. It can go any direction. Water can only go one direction on the ground, but vapor can even have all the world, right? And that is why the more we have space in between the particles, in between our beliefs, and between our thoughts, the more, first of all, the less impact it would be in our body if our ideas are not shared with our loved ones or our colleagues. And the more likely we come into a place where we can meet with another party. So the space between our thoughts, between our beliefs, between our ideas. So gripping is one part that we were talking about, but leaving space. And I actually believe it's a mysterious and miraculous space from what all the novelty comes from, all possibilities come from. And this is something that if we are more conscious of it and add it to our awareness more often, we are more efficient, open, loving, present, and so on. But it's not that easy. Mm-hmm. It takes, first of all, awareness that we need it, and then practice. So awareness, actually, there is a cliche, awareness is a key. Yes, but the key still needs to open a door, and we still need to get into this door and start doing something different.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said.
When I was saying this, what was going in your mind, if I may ask?
Do you want me to be honest?
Yes.
It's a lot of theory, and you know me, of how can I apply this to my life, and examples, and it's all intellectually makes sense. But I think the challenge of all of our lives is to be able to apply it into our lives and really, truly make it real for each of us. And so the part of my goal with Kaya is to take these concepts and take such amazing knowledge and put it into practical experiences and examples that people can use to make it real for their lives.
Very well, thank you. And I actually felt that somewhere when I was saying, I lost you.
You lost
me. Yeah. I lost you somewhere because your it's interesting how you can feel that another person is not focused. You lost interest. But if you don't mind, since I already brought it up, and since you so courageously confronted me with with philosophizing, give me an example, or an example maybe from your own life, or your either personal or business, where you felt that there was a conflict between different vision from you and another party who you really cared about. And there is different perspective or different ways of approaching the same problem, if you will.
For what purpose?
For explaining how this space I'm talking about, adding space, can help, because releasing the grip is very vivid, right? There is a grip, we're releasing it. And not being so much attached to the result, not being so much attached to the certain way of doing things. I think it's more common sense, right? But adding space, it may be not as much a common sense as releasing the grip. But I would like to still use this because it's not, for me, it's not a concept. For me, it's actually a practice, but I would like to show how we can use it as a practice.
And by space, do you mean time?
Well, no, I actually mean when we are solving a problem and we are right into this, like, midst of this problem, actually increasing space, removing yourself from the situation and trying to see and observe it as an outsider, as an observer, not as a participant and player, but as an observer. This is literally adding space, exiting out of the box and trying to look at this box from the outside. So it's space. Time too. Well, time, space continuum usually nowadays are used together, but no, I'm talking about particularly space.
So I'm going to use an example along the lines of the feedback I just gave you and us working together. Of, we often joke that I'm the lover and you're the intellectual. And in a previous project we were working together, you were philosophizing and you lost me, and it was in written. And so I was reading and I'm like trying to read every word and trying to make sense of every word because this project was so important to me, but it didn't come natural. And because of our relationship and I feel close to you and I can share feedback with you, I probably don't feel comfortable sharing as honest a feedback with everyone in my life. But I'm fortunate enough to feel comfortable enough to share, like, this is so pie in the sky and I don't understand what you're saying. And in getting to know you better, that was probably very hurtful for you because you value your knowledge so deeply. So yeah, maybe that's an example of where we didn't see eye to eye.
It's an excellent example. First of all, of course, I'm so grateful for having these dialogues and being able to be so open with that. And yes, for a long time, I was conditioned to value my knowledge, whatever it is. I actually don't believe it is encyclopedic in any way, but whatever I have, I do value and still do value. But at the same time, more and more, I see how often it becomes a hindrance. So it means what sometimes come to me as I do philosophizing. For me, the sign is that because when I read what I write, and I'm not interested. So it comes to me too. So when I'm reading sometimes what I write and I lose my interest, it means, oh, if I'm losing interest and I'm writing this and I'm so interested in this, of course, most people would lose interest there. But you know what happens when we are talking about, and you caught me off guard when I was talking primarily from my head about the space, then this is where philosophizing starts. When we're talking about the heart, first of all, not only that it's practical, because philosophizing and putting philosophy into practice, it can also be practical, but without the element of
the heart,
without the element of love, without element of feeling, not only thinking. And I think when you become so tense, not getting, or frustrated that I'm philosophizing again, it's just where we can meet. And for me, when I feel that you are so open-hearted, then you are everywhere. let me grab into something to put it into a line of a conversation. And being everywhere is beautiful. It's almost like a firework. But then you are amused with it. It's beautiful, but then it's gone. Okay, we need this thread, at least for me.
Yeah.
We need to continue holding this thread. But I really would like to go back to the, if you'd like, because I really believe it's practical, taking the space. When I said that it's actually literally looking at the situation with the eyes of an observer, not player, participant, does it become more palpable for you?
Yes. Yes. And, you know, to tie it back to how we started this conversation of knowing yourself, it's knowing what, when you are upset or when something irritates you or when you're triggered, I think knowing yourself brings you out of reaction and into response. And the space is required in that, of not immediately going to I'm right and you're wrong and this is the way I want it.
But I also actually probably disagree with you here. It's not knowing yourself that brings you outside of the box. It's actually knowing that you don't know and cannot know with such a tight grip that takes you outside of the box. But knowing that you need to get outside. So it's always a dance. It's an element of, if I cannot solve it, maybe I need to take a walk. Maybe I need to meditate for 5, 10, whatever number of minutes. So this is a different quality of knowing. It's not knowing with your head. It's actually knowing with your entire being. I am tense. I am so preoccupied and so focused on solving this problem or resolving the conflict that I feel that I need to let go and create this space, release the grip. What happens when we release the grip? Space immediately gets even our, between our fingers. Look, it's so tangible. This is what I mean by space. This is gripping, adding some space. And knowing with your body when you are tense, when you are frustrated, when sometimes you may feel pains, it means taking a step back and adding the space in between the problem and the playground and you as an observer.
Be the observer.
Yes, yes. And again, be a participant again, be a player again, and then again, observe. Because, and this is how our ego and our heart interplay. We need our ego to play, but we can observe with our heart. And we need both our ego and our heart, or our head and our truth, fundamental truth or love, which for me are all the same things, or spirit or soul, depending on the tradition, we call it different names, but our true self to be there, but with all of its coverings, because it's almost like wanting to be a soul without a body. It's wanting to be a soul without an ego. As long as we're in our body, we better befriend our ego and use it when it's needed and let it be there on the back seat when it's not needed.
I think that's a whole other conversation of when is the ego a hindrance and a benefit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, would you like to kind of sum up what we've discussed today, or do you think it's needed or not needed?
Well, what I'm taking away is befriending the ego is a whole life lesson, and being aware of when it is actually helpful in my life. Um, and I think how to befriend the ego is through the heart, and being able to align motives through the heart and universal love and connection, and to really look at the grips that we hold on our lives that feed our ego through identity and expectation and outcome, and using space as a tool for it all.
Yes,
What are your
beautifully.
takeaways?
And what I take away is that when I go back into my familiar, cozy, comfortable philosophizing,
Mm-hmm.
when I feel that I'm losing a person, paying attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
When I feel that my thoughts, my mind carries me away, to the extent that there is no connection, the connection is lost, attending to that, not only noticing it, but also attending to this. And thank you for being courageous enough to bring it to my attention. And also, really, when philosophy is useful, but again, to the extent that it helps to connect and not becomes a hindrance in connection. So thank you for that, for bringing this to my attention. And thank you, Stacy, for this wonderful conversation, wonderful dialogue. I truly wholeheartedly enjoyed.
Me too.